Hello, everyone. Welcome to this market snapshot on COVID-19's impact on Southeast Asia exports. My name is Daniel James. I'm the founder of Arctic Technologies and co-founder of Olympia International Consulting. Okay, I first want to look at the deaths and cases in Southeast Asia by country, and from that information, plus a few other factors, be able to categorize each country into different buckets from low risk to medium risk and high risk. And I also segmented this on the chart on the left. You can see I broke it out between emerging markets and mature markets because some of the dynamics between each are a little bit different based on the capabilities of the country. What you'll see in the top half of the chart, the emerging markets, the countries in green include Papua New Guinea, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Vietnam. And these are countries that have had 0 deaths for at least 30 days. In many cases, they've actually had 0 new cases. So they're in a really excellent situation to be able to get back to work and to support exports and get back to normal business activities effective immediately. And I happen to live in one of those countries, or I live in another green country, Taiwan. We'll get into that in a minute. But that is the common denominator between the greens is basically their industries, their operations are fully in capacity, and they can focus on exports immediately. Then you have the medium risk countries, which in the emerging markets include Thailand, Malaysia, and Philippines. And those really are countries that are back to work in some limited capacity. And they do have more cases, like they do have active cases and active deaths, so that they haven't fully gotten over the hump with COVID-19, but they're slowly getting back to work, and they may be doing a significant amount of work at home type of activities. But for those that have a significant manufacturing base, they're actually starting to get the production up and running, but in a very safe way. So for those countries, I put them in a medium risk categorization because they don't really have much chance to do international travel, or bringing in customers or anybody from a different category country could be difficult for a while. Like it might be 3 to 6 months before any opportunities for the travel could open up for these countries. So that's why I put them in their own separate bucket, not because they aren't operational, but because the travel limitations are going to be really restricted for the ongoing future with these countries. Then finally, I have the high risk countries, which include Indonesia, Bangladesh, China, Hong Kong, and India. And these are countries where the cases are still, spread very rapidly. In many cases, they might be over the hump in terms that the new cases are declining, but there's still so much infection that even getting back to work is still going to take some time for these countries. Travel is completely off limits. Even within the country, travel is going to be difficult, but definitely overseas travel is there's no end in sight on that. So those countries have a much more different set of parameters that they have to operate under than even the green or yellows. Then if you look at the mature markets, you've got Taiwan and New Zealand have had 0 new cases. In the case of Taiwan, it's been over 2 months that they haven't even had a new case, let alone a death. New Zealand's in a very similar favorable situation. So those countries are both 100% operational, able to do exports and imports without any restriction. Then you've got the countries in yellow in the mature markets, which include Australia, Korea, Japan, and Singapore. And these countries, every country has its own unique situation, so it's kind of hard to put them all in exactly the same bucket. You do really have to dissect each country individually. Some of them are island economies. Others, may be connected to another country, but they're pretty closed off in their ability to control their borders. So the takeaway from these countries is similar to the medium risk countries in the emerging markets, which is they're operational in some capacity, but with, an asterisk where they have some restrictions and social distancing in place for both the service and the manufacturing base. And there's some hope that there can be some international travel at some point in the not long distance future, but it's going to be difficult for countries of green status to accept countries from yellow status in the near-term future because of the obvious risk that it puts them under. Also, any country that has red, is not going to be accepted into any other country, or even other red countries. So I think the biggest caveat for all these is, to get countries fully operational again, you're going to have both the local capacity able to be fully restored, for the manufacturing or even engineering services. You have to be 100% able to get back to work, but then simultaneously, the countries that can have the leading edge for travel will have a strategic advantage. So one thing that you should be looking at is matching similar risk countries. Can greens travel to future greens maybe by the end of the year? Possibly. That could be a realistic scenario. And I would be looking at that. How quickly can a yellow turn into a green? Can they go 30 days without spreading the disease to where they could then be open to travel with other countries that are in a similar situation? Maybe that could be like the first little network of countries to work together to get their economies sort of boosted in the short term. Then the chart on the right shows a COVID-19 map by Southeast Asia. And this basically lines out two key statistics. Number one is the actual deaths by emerging versus mature market. And you can see it's almost all emerging market, 93%. So the mature markets have actually done pretty well. Now there's fewer people in the mature market, so you have to measure it on a population basis, but just in total net deaths, the mature markets have handled it pretty well. Emerging markets have really struggled. And this is just the data we know. We know that there sometimes can be unreliable data, but for the data we actually have, valid information, this is how it lays out statistically. And then the other key factor is the Southeast Asia global exports by COVID-19 risk. So that red, yellow, green on the left-hand side of the chart, if you look at the total net exports from these countries and see, okay, what does this mean from an APAC perspective? These could be exports from one Asia country to another. And in fact, that's a statistics that I've studied, where over 50% of the exports from Asia is inter-Asia. So they're an export from one country is an import to another APAC country. So what is that APAC/global trade going to look like? Well, the countries that are in green have a clear advantage, and they can focus on the products and technologies that they have specialization in. The countries in yellow also have an advantage because countries can be willing to accept products from those regions, although there's going to be some probably medium-term travel constraints. And so the countries in yellow have an opportunity to get green effectively. Like if they can prove to the world that they can go 2 to 4 weeks without spreading any new COVID-19, that's going to open up the door for other countries that are in a similar situation to be able to travel within those countries. And then the countries in red, that's really the most interesting conversation because that's half the market in terms of net exports. These countries are going to have to make a decision. I think for most of them, the ship has sailed in terms of actually ever having a chance to get green in terms of using technologies or social distancing. I mean, once you get to a certain point where there's enough COVID-19 in your society, it would be an enormous economic toll to get that back under control. So those countries are going to have to make some tough decisions. Number one, do they just let the virus burn through? I mean, if there's no going back, if they can't really solve it, so is it best just to flatten the curve, but then slowly let their economies rebuild in a cruise controlled type of dynamic? And then, hopefully at some point they can either have a vaccine or perhaps this thing just on its own goes away through herd immunity or maybe some other environmental factors that, we can't predict right now. Those countries have a very difficult situation. This is going to slow them down. So if you're in one of those red countries, is the economy going to be zero? No. In fact, it may not even have to take a nosedive, but the rebound cycle of those countries could be significantly impacted because they're, at this heightened level of risk. and other countries that are at low risk are going to be a little hesitant to want to do business with them, because if you can't even travel to that country, even in the short or medium term, that puts you at an unfavorable position. So green countries are more apt to work with other green countries. Yellows have, probably in the next 3 to 6 months, there's a chance they could become green, or, be able to convince other countries enough that they've got the virus under control that those other countries could accept citizens from their countries to travel, and they can start to get their economic engines moving again. And if you're in a red country, then basically you have to make a decision. Are you going to focus more on the economy and getting the engines moving, or are you going to focus more on COVID-19, which could be really difficult for the economy in the short term? So that's how I really see this laying out with the information that we have today of Southeast Asia. If you do business with one of these countries, or you're looking to change from one country's supplier to another, or need to have a second source, feel free to contact me anytime. I'm available for 30-minute Ask an Expert calls. We can do a quick discussion about country-level dynamics going on in Southeast Asia. I've been out here for 5 years, so I have a lot of insights working hand-in-hand with a lot of these countries, and I can give you some good advice in terms of where directionally you should be focusing for your business and supply chain. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to sign up for our 2020 Edge Computing Workshop, Southeast Asia Edition. This is a technology crash course that's designed for industry professionals. In this session, we offer it in basic, pro, or expert level curriculums, and in each you can learn about the impact of edge computing and future technologies on Southeast Asia. We'll look at individual countries and their readiness for different types of technologies. Also, we'll do a deeper dive discussion on COVID-19's impact on key industries in Southeast Asia. And the pro package will include that, plus the integration of edge computing with new technologies such as 5G, Industry 4.0, and artificial intelligence. And we include a bonus of edge with cybersecurity. And then finally, in our expert sessions, we look at edge systems and deployment. We'll review the edge infrastructure, devices, and even use cases, with a bonus of a discussion for considerations for investment. So if you haven't signed up, please go to our website at www.olympiaic.com/edge workshop, and you can register today. Thank you.